for Israel, crucial for us in America, by the way, since most American Muslims also subscribe to that brand this evening. 2, Sinai. Sinai is that big tank buffer between Israel and Egypt. But Sinai is more than that. Sinai is Israel's natural gas for the next release for the next few years, and it's oil. Sinai is Israel's shipping lanes to Eilat, and most importantly of all, Sinai is, at the moment, policed by, who polices Sinai? Does anyone know?
Egyptian army.
Lightly armed American observers, 400 American soldiers. Did you know that? You knew that.
Yeah, I knew that.
What's going to happen if they start getting blown up? I was a kid. I was like 8 or 9 years old. The State of Israel, no, I was more than that. I was 12. State of Israel Bonds dinner. I was asked to speak by Rabbi Grosso of Shalom in Miami. He wrote my speech for me. I always remember my first line. Think about it. Room full of rich Floridians, most of them non-Jews. I got up and said, the State of Israel and the people of Israel never asked for 1 penny in American taxpayer dollars. Hasn't that changed? And they'll never ask for the life of one American boy to protect their country. They do it themselves. The second thing has never changed. No American soldier has died directly defending Israel. Should that, God forbid, change, should American peacekeepers start getting killed in the Sinai by al-Qaeda bands, should the Bedouins start being radicalized and infiltrated, should Sinai become a base for al-Qaeda, 1 of 3 things will happen. Either Israel will ask Egypt to come in, it already has, much more, which itself is worrisome. 2, Israel itself will reinvade Sinai, which is not a great thing. Or 3, the United States will have to reinforce its soldiers, put more troops in there, and we'll have a third front in our war in the Middle East. It'll be a front too close to Israel to escape the idea that we're not doing, the United States is doing to protect Israel, all that entails for the Middle East. The Sinai will be a magnet for terrorists and terrorism. It will be the Super Bowl of jihad. And that brings me to the last and biggest concern, is that if that should happen in the Sinai, aside from what it does in American support for Israel, that itself may radicalize Egyptian society and push Egypt, and even the generals in Egypt, in a direction that will be catastrophic for Israel and America. So things are great speech. This is that, considering the alternatives to Mubarak, this was probably the best alternative we come up with. It was better than the rosiest alternative in the Jerusalem Report article, but doesn't mean it's ideal or perfect. I want to end with a short Dvar Torah. It's important Dvar Torah for this time of the year, for any time of the year. How are we to think about Sadat and Mubarak? They were mass murderers of their own people and of Jews. They made a surprise attack on Yom Kippur on the State of Israel. They killed over 2,500 Israelis in battle. And before that, they killed thousands of Israelis. And yet, how do we relate to them? Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik has a word so appropriate. There's a minor character in the Bible. His name is Harvona. Who was Harvona? We have an 8th grader student here.
Assistant of one of his ministers.
Where do we find his name? Where do we find his name in the Bible? What does he say? What does he pop up and say? Come on, tell us. He's the one who says, Your Majesty. Excellent. Touro scholarship. There's a gallows 50 amas high that evil Haman, my boss, built, on which the hanger made dude Mordechai. Frag the Gemara in Megillah. How do you know the exact height of the gallows? He built the gallows. He was Haman's senior advisor in charge of ethnic cleansing and genocide. He was the Eichmann, Soloveitchik says. He was the Eichmann of ancient Egypt, of Persia. He was the man in charge of the genocide. Well, we don't like that guy, do we? We must hate his guts. We have to have a show trial. Execute him. Bad guy. And when did he do it? When did he turn sides? When? At what point? Do you remember?
When his side was losing.
After Haman is sentenced to death. He only suggests a way to kill him. After the gig is up. After they're surrendered. Then he switches sides. What a hero. We hate his guts, don't we? Well, no. What do we say about Chavon every year in our davening?
Zachor Latov.
Zachor Latov. Frag Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik. Are we so open-minded that our brains have fallen out? Why do we every year dance around saying Zachor Latov to a man who tried to... We say, Arur Haman, Arur Zeresh, Arur Harvona. Try to kill every Jew on the planet. The answer, says Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, is we are small and we are few. We take our friends where we can get them. And had Mordechai had Harvona drawn and quartered and pickled in oil, which he deserved, the next time there's a Harvona, he wouldn't switch ever, ever, ever. And if you reward Harvona with a gold watch and a stipend, maybe the next guy will switch at the beginning of the plot, not at the end. So we remind ourselves every year. 3,500 years later, we still got remind ourselves, 2,500, 2,300, 2,400, depending on your art scroll. If you follow history or art scroll, oops, I didn't say that. At least 2,300 years ago. And we still remember Harvona. The only reason he's remembered on the face of this planet is because we remind ourselves every year. Based on that, I would say, the Rav said this in a shiur at Yeshiva University over the matter of Lord Caradon. Lord Caradon was the last British Governor General in Palestine. In that position, he signed the execution warrants for several members of the Stern Gang in Irgun. Subsequently, he became Britain's ambassador to the United Nations, where he delivered one of the most stirring speeches on behalf of Israel in the Six-Day War. He was presented with Yeshiva University, decided to give him an honorary doctorate for his strong support for Israel, and then someone dug up from pre-Google days that 20 years earlier, he had signed the death warrants for Jewish freedom fighters, terrorists, depending on your politics. People were very upset. Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik asked to give a public shiur. Ever in my years of YU, after Ma'ariv, he asked could he speak to the student body, and he delivered a ringing speech. Gam Chavon Zachor Latov. We take our friends where we can get them. In the spirit of what my Rebbe said, I must say to you, Mubarak and Sadat, Gam Chavon Zachor Latov. You have to appreciate not what they did, the evil they did earlier in their lives, but the good they did later. The fact that no Israeli or Egyptian soldier has shot at each other in the last 30 years. Gam Chavon Zachor Latov. Any questions? Hope it was fun. Yes, Rabbi.
The worries the concerns that you had mentioned about in the Sinai, are you saying those are still possible now?
Very possible. Extremely possible. The Sinai is a large place. It is peacefully. The Egyptian military kept an eye on the border. The Egyptians kept Gaza locked up. What happens that at the minimal, the new regime might want to show goodwill by loosening the boycott on Gaza. I didn't even get that. I forgot. I said there were three. I left that out before. Forgive me. I only said two of the three. The third thing was Hamas and Gaza. The minimal. This is, if Egypt becomes more democratic, the peace treaty will not go. But the iron hand over Gaza may be relaxed. If Egypt becomes more democratic, it's likely, and as we speak, I would assume Al-Qaeda is infiltrating into Sinai. Those Bedouin tribes.
Now more than before?
I think they have more of an opportunity there now.
Why isn't the military still in control?
I think the Egyptian military is in control, but first of all, it's lightly in control. Secondly, it has other focus right now. I was in Israel last week. I didn't have any government briefings, but what I picked up from things I read in Israel was that they're scared silly about Sinai. Everybody was a sabotage. They blew up the natural gas pipeline was blown up by Bedouins, by who knows who did it. That's scary. From 1900 to 79 to 2011, there was never a successful sabotage attack on the natural gas pipeline. There's been one already. So then, Sinai is worrisome. Daven hard. Any other questions? Oh, yes?
What about the Iranian ships? I read somebody saying that now the Egyptians are showing that they are willing to do business with Iran and less with Israel.
Again, you can spin that any way you'd like. The Iranians sent 2 warships through the Suez Canal. Egyptians could have done one of 3 things. They could have said, you can't go through, and then that might have triggered. I think the Iranians were hoping that the Egyptians would say no, and that the Muslim Brotherhood could then generate demonstrations in Cairo. The Egyptians let them through. And they promptly were surrounded by the American Navy. Right? They weren't allowed to offshore anywhere near Gaza. Right? So, what? What do you think?
That's what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't get that far.
Yeah, they ended up sailing to Syria. So they ship stuff to Syria all the time that we don't like. There are 40,000 has Syrian Iranian missiles in southern Syria. How do you think they got there? Over land or around the Cape of Good Hope? So I think that decision, which was definitely made in Washington, was a smart decision. It diffused a possible problem. But you can't at this time. The new regime in Egypt has to be very, very careful not to be sucker punched. not to be fooled into doing something which would then be used to make popular anger. For example, I'll give you one example. If there were a vote tomorrow in the General Assembly of the United Nations, as there may be within the next few months, to condemn Israel's settlement policy, expect Egypt to vote to condemn. They will vote to condemn. If they abstain on the vote, there'll be riots in Cairo. You have to be very careful. And before we have a fit, after all, the European countries are going to be voting for the same resolution. We can't expect Egypt to be better than France and Britain, can we? Or Canada. That was Security Council. But the GA, Egypt's not on the Security Council. But there are going to be things like that. Sometimes we have unrealistic expectations. Sometimes we expect an Arab country, because they made peace with Israel, to act like the Likud. It's not going to. It's not going to. And they're going to probably be strong. Listen, the Egyptian media is anti-Semitic. Their schools are anti-Semitic. This we know. This is a major problem. Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State, raised it several times. But forget about Egypt. I asked Elliot Abrams the following question on behalf of the OU in a White House briefing in 2005. I said, Elliot, the textbooks that are used in Iraq today are printed in Saudi Arabia. There's no picture of Israel in there. They teach math like this. If a freedom fighter kills 2 Zionist pigs, and another freedom fighter kills 2 Zionist pigs, how many Zionist pigs have been killed? I'm not making this up. These are the textbooks used in Iraq under American occupation, paid for by our taxpayers. Which Elliot Abrams said, we really can't afford to lose the Saudis. That was his answer. So before we get upset at the Egyptian, we're funding and paying for that in Iraq. Afghanistan and Iraq have a worse voting record today in Israel than they did under Saddam Hussein under the Taliban. They are becoming founts of anti-Israel rhetoric in the United Nations. Because in order to satisfy their regimes, they got to bend over the other direction. So you may have a little bit of that coming out of Egypt. That's not necessarily great. And then again, the Palestinian Authority is doing the same thing in their schools, aren't they? That's right, under Israeli military occupation. Okay, last question. Rabbi.
It sounds like when the revolution was starting, and there were different commentators on the Muslim Brotherhood, they were playing down the danger of the Muslim Brotherhood because they've renounced officially they renounced terrorism and they're political, and they've gotten into the political scene, so therefore we don't have to be so worried about them. From what you're saying now, it really sounds like everybody was worried about them, but they were doing their best to behind the scenes keep them out of
Yes. But the way you can't say you're worried about them, because then you legitimize them into a stronger force than they are. Right. Yeah, there was a great deal of concern about Muslim Brotherhood. Right.
So, but those commentators are basically they don't understand like you did. They were more coming out of.
No, I think they may very well understood what I also think they were saying what had to be said. By the way, if I was put on television, and I have spoken occasionally in the media, I probably would have said the same thing. Because you don't want to give the impression that they're bigger than, you don't want to give them more gravitas than they deserve. Truth of the matter is,
those commentators were coming from knowing, just
I
trying
don't know.
as much as making as playing it down. Because
I think they were giving the official American spin on the issue. The official American spin is that the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt has been denuded, it has been weakened, it is not the Muslim Brotherhood of the 1950s and 60s. It is trying to work within the political system, as witnessed the fact they did not call for revoking the peace treaty.
One person did.
Okay, one person. I can find you one person to say anything, right?
I thought he was a good spokesman for that.
No, but he's apparently not that clear that he's a spokesman for them. I think the Muslim Brotherhood is potentially a grave danger because of their ideology. A grave danger. Because of the pan-Islamic ideology, which they have never denounced. That's the heart of their ideology, and that's the danger. Because if the Egyptians decide to stopping Egyptians and stopping Arabs, or even more stopping Muslims first, that will be catastrophic for all the reasons I spelled out. Okay? Yes? Yes.
Did you want to hazard like a prediction about like what if Egypt's going to move toward a civilian government at this point, like in the near future?
Since the destruction of our temple, prophecy has been reserved to a very small group of people. I'm not one of them. The hopeful